So I'd like to start by introducing you to Keegan. Not sure how much you can see from this picture, but Keegan is a really curious, playful, sweet boy. And when this photo was taken, Keegan was only 4 years old, but already somewhat of a medical mystery to his many, many doctors. You see, Keegan's development was delayed, and for a long time, doctors didn't know how to pinpoint the reasons for that. Until he met Dr. Karen Grip. Karen Grip is the chief pediatric genetics at Nemours Hospital in Delaware. And I want to share a little secret with you because Dr. Karen Grip is one of a few hundred geneticists worldwide that have a superpower. They can't fly or turn invisible, but they can diagnose a patient simply by looking at their face. And these superheroes develop the skills over decades, and they sharpen it. And in recent years, they're also using face-to-gene, an AI-powered tool to help doctors diagnose patients with rare diseases. Unfortunately, Dr. Grip is now providing some bad news to Keegan and his family. Keegan is just being diagnosed with a syndrome called Smith-Lemli-Opitz. It's a rare disease. It affects 1 in about 60,000 newborns. And it has characteristics of autism and cognitive impairment. It affects the lungs, the kidneys, the heart. But there's a silver lining because although severe cases of this syndrome could be life-threatening, Keegan's case is considered mild. But this moment of diagnosis, this is a great moment for the family. It's not an easy moment, but it's a great one because it ends this unknown part of a journey. And with ending that part begins a new part, a more hopeful part, one where management of the disease is possible, potentially even a cure. So let's continue this good vibe and maybe play a game. This is a game you probably all know. At home, when we play this, we call this Spot the Lie. I'm going to show you 3 statements. One of them is going to be false. I'm going to ask you to guess. Ready? Let's go. 1 in every 10 people are affected by a rare disease. Number 2, 50% of rare disease patients are kids. It takes up to 24 months to get an accurate diagnosis for a rare disease patient. I'll give you a few seconds to think about this. So by show of hands, who thinks that statement number 1 is false? Okay. How about statement number 2? Not as much. Statement number 3. Okay. I think statement number 1 won by a landslide. 30 million Americans, 30 million Europeans, over 400 million people around the world are affected by rare diseases. Rare diseases are not rare at all. And not only are 50% of patients with rare diseases kids, 3 out of 10 will probably not live to see their 5th birthday. And no, it doesn't take 24 months. It takes up to 8 years on average to get a diagnosis for a rare disease patient. And those 8 years are a long diagnostic odyssey for them and their families. So these numbers, they're provided by an organization called Global Genes. It's an amazing organization working for over 10 years to increase awareness and change policy around the world. And if you look at these numbers and do the math, you see the problem. When I first learned about this, I was overwhelmed. I thought, change is inevitable. What can we do to trigger change? You see, when you talk to parents of kids with rare diseases, they will jump and adopt any new technology that can help diagnose their kids faster. But for some reason, clinicians remain resistant to change. We live in this new era of AI, artificial intelligence, right? Go out to the exhibit hall. I dare you to find one company that's not going to talk about their AI solution. So you would imagine that the healthcare sector, with all these new discoveries happening every day and the immense potential to change and impact people's lives, will be an early adopter. But the reality is that the healthcare sector is one of the slowest sectors to adopt AI. When we talk about the challenges of integrating AI into healthcare, we focus on stuff like, how do we get data and preserve the quality of the data? How do we fix inherent biases in the data? How do we incentivize sharing data across different silos around the world? How do we fix inequities and get AI to serve underserved populations? And these are all very important topics. These are topics that should require public debate and attention, but none of them are relevant if we don't address the elephant in the room. And that is that when it comes to integrating AI into healthcare, the biggest barrier is acceptance by doctors. And acceptance is anchored in trust. So without getting trust and acceptance from doctor, AI is going to remain a promise for change rather than an agent for change. You can imagine that at this point, I had so many questions going through my head. You know, how can we diagnose more patients with rare diseases? How can we get them diagnosed earlier? How can we facilitate faster, better treatments for these patients? To date, more than 95% of more than 7,000 known rare diseases still don't have an FDA-approved treatment on the market. And it's not because we don't have enough patients. It's because we don't have enough identified patients. Over the last 9 years, I had the privilege of leading a team with one goal in mind. How do we end the diagnostic odyssey for kids with rare diseases, kids like Keegan? With that goal in mind, we started thinking about relevant AI solutions that we can create. And we started with a very strong team that had machine learning and computer vision expertise. In fact, before FDNA, they were part of a bigger team that developed the facial recognition technology that Facebook uses and you use to tag images of friends and family. Why facial analysis? Turns out that about half of these diseases have a very distinct, recognizable pattern in their face. And when we started in 2011, we learned that a few hundred geneticists around the world are using their own human pattern recognition to clinically diagnose these patients and then confirm their diagnosis with genetic testing. So we decided that we're going to build the next generation of phenotyping solutions. And we're going to make these tools, these pattern recognition capabilities, accessible to all doctors in the world. In our vision, every doctor would pull out their smartphone. They would take pictures of the patient's faces. They would get real-time results of what diagnosis these patients may have. This information would be extracted and shared with the medical record. Then it would be shared with a lab so that they can decide which genes to test. But when we came to realize this vision, the reality was much harder, as you can imagine, than we think. And the challenges that we've faced, every AI startup that I've talked to in the healthcare space faces. And that's, where do we get the initial data to even train this algorithm? How do we maintain the quality? How do we assure the quality of the data? How do we protect patient privacy? And how do we even productize this version, this technology, into a product? All these different challenges pointed in one single direction. Work with the clinician, collaborate with the clinician. But in order to do that, we had to gain their trust. So we launched Face2Gene in 2014 in the intention and hope that it's going to become a system that helps clinician diagnose patients faster and better, that it's going to become a platform that connects data around the world, that is going to advance research and make scientific discoveries, and above all, that it's going to give hope for new treatments for patients with rare diseases. Only 5 years later, Face2Gene has an unbelievable adoption rate of more than 70% of clinical geneticists around the world. That means that doctors from more than 2,000 clinical sites in over 130 countries around the world, using, by the way, AWS as a platform, are making genetic diagnoses and getting insights, actionable insights, routinely. And today I want to share a little bit about how we did that. But maybe before that, a couple of words about me personally. So this is me 15 years ago. I was an M&A and corporate attorney. And I'll never forget the first day on the job. I went in, I was terrified. I got into the executive partner's office, and he shared his definition with me about what a good lawyer would be. That would be not the lawyer that had the ability to cite the law on demand, or not the one that crafted the best argument in court, not even the one with the most billable hours, although in hindsight, I find that a little bit hard to believe. But it was the one who made the deal happen for their clients. And those words resonated with me for a while, for more than a decade of practicing. Every time I would go to a deal, I would see the parties involved, I would evaluate the gaps between the parties, and I would try to bridge those gaps by building trust. So naturally, when we started FDNA and we were dealing with a group of very talented AI engineers with absolutely no knowledge about genetics, and on the other side, working with providers who knew nothing about technology, the only thing we could do is really try to bridge the gaps by building trust. To date, one of my favorite activities and privilege, I think, as CEO of a company is that I can go out and talk to our users whenever I want. And I just love sitting with them, understanding the needs and the pain points that our users are experiencing day in, day out. And I love going back to our AI team and trying to understand what they're doing, the capabilities, the latest and greatest. And understanding the challenges that our users are facing and the capabilities that we can develop from AI allows us to connect the dots, to bridge the gaps. And that's exactly the space where the magic can happen. So today, I'm going to share with you my perspective. It's not only how AI companies can push AI and integrate it into the workflow, but also how doctors should work with AI companies and incorporate those AI solutions into their workflow. Here goes. So, dear techies, I know that you've been taught that you need to move fast and break things, but stop for 1 second and consider that the thing that you're breaking in healthcare risks the life of a human being. And doctors are primarily and genuinely concerned about the well-being of their patients. So I would suggest that in healthcare, we should move slow and fix things. And here are some practical tips that I can share with you. So number one, go and study the workflow by observation. Early days at FDNA, we would ship teams to shadow clinicians. We would send them to any conference we could. We would read anything we could. And we would start thinking how to become a geneticist. And in fact, through that process, we became part of their inner circle of trust and deemed insiders. This is the second point, share your sources of data and be transparent about it. Because this is one of the biggest sources of mistrust with doctors, not being able to assess the technology and what it's trained on. At FDNA, we try to do this by explaining, visualizing the AI in the software. But more important than that is really to try and be willing and share all the scope of data that you have. Number three, validate the technology and publish. So I understand, being a lawyer, everything about IP protection and competition, but in healthcare, there's no acceptance without validation, and there's no validation without publication, period. We've been publishing since 2012, even before we had a product. It's been our #1 marketing strategy. And number 4, embrace your users as trusted advisors. We've all heard this before. Our users, our customers, they can't tell us what they want and what they need. But in healthcare, the workflow has complete trust by physicians. They learned workflow, they learned how to trust it for many, many years. We have to respect it and ease in. Now for doctors. Now, I hate being the one to say this, but AI is not the Terminator, and the machines are not rising and coming to get you. And AI is also not coming out for your jobs. But doctors who in the future use AI might replace doctors who don't. So I'm going to propose a 4-step solution for doctors who want to integrate AI into their workflow. Step number 1, make an effort to study AI and study the data sources it's based on. Step number 2, set aside time to learn and test this out of the clinical workflow. Step number 3, decide in advance when, how, and why you want to use this, and decide what your criteria for success is going to be. And step number 4 may be the most important thing. No matter what, always trust your instincts. You're the one who went through medical school. Now, as I said, I talk a lot to users and I hear feedback. And one of my favorites is obviously, Face2Gene was right on the money. You were right. Diagnosis was top of the results. But it's not my favorite answer. My favorite answer of all time is when the users come to me and say, Face2Gene got me thinking about something that I would never have thought of without it. And the reason I like that answer so much is that it symbolizes to me how doctors and AI became stronger together. Now, we've been able to apply these principles and, in essence, transition an entire sector without disrupting it. And earlier this year, when Deep Gestalt, our AI framework, was published in Nature Medicine, it was already evident that we made a mark on the clinical workflow. We've shown that we've achieved more than 90% accuracy rates for over 300 syndromes with our analysis. We've shown that when we combine our next-generation phenotyping with next-generation sequencing together, we more than triple the diagnostic yield of this combined offering. On the tail of that success, in the summer, we partnered with PerkinElmer Genomics. Together, we're pioneering a joint offering that's going to revolutionize genetic testing and its role in healthcare. We're building an AI stack of technologies. We're going to analyze voice and video, medical notes, and clinical vital signs, and many more resources of phenotypic information. And this really extends our total addressable market and disease categories pretty rapidly, going through cardiology, nephrology, neurology, ophthalmology, and many more. And while this vision is no longer confined to clinical genetics, the mission remains the same, which brings us back to where we started, trust and acceptance. To build trust, you have to be authentic and true to your mission. And our mission is to end the diagnostic disease, the diagnostic journey for rare disease patients, kids like Keegan, who, because of Face2Gene, know what to face, and through that, expect better outcomes through preventive care and management. We've also helped Dr. Grip and her band of superheroes impact the lives of more than 200,000 patients worldwide. But as you heard, there are hundreds of millions of others, and we want to get to each and every one of them. So we have our work cut out for us, but we're ready to face the challenge. And if any of you have an interest in this field, please come meet me after this talk. I'd love to continue the conversation. Thank you.